It's 11:30 p.m. The house is dark. The world outside is quiet. Suddenly, a phone rings. For one type of person, this is just a sound. Maybe it's a wrong number. Maybe it's a late-night text from a friend who forgot the time. They check the screen with curiosity or maybe a little annoyance. Their heart rate doesn't change. Their breath doesn't hitch. They remain entirely in the present moment, unbothered. But for another type of person, that ringtone is a siren. Before they even reach for the device, their body has flooded with adrenaline. Their mind hasn't just heard a noise, it has constructed a tragedy. Someone has died, there's been an accident, the police are calling. My life is about to change forever. In the 3 seconds it takes to pick up the phone, they have already attended the funeral, mourned the loss, and braced themselves for the collapse of their world. Now, zoom out. These two people live in the same reality, but they experience two completely different worlds. One walks through life assuming things will probably be okay. The other moves through life constantly bracing for impact. And this brings us to a specific, often misunderstood behavior. We live in the information age. We are told that being informed is a civic duty, that we must bear witness to everything, everywhere, all at once. And yet there is a growing group of people who have quietly, deliberately disconnected. They don't watch the news. They don't have cable. They don't have Twitter notifications turned on. When a major global event happens, they are often the last to know. Society calls them ignorant, friends call them privileged, colleagues call them detached, but psychologically, something much deeper is happening here. These aren't people who don't care. Often, they are people who care too much. Their silence isn't emptiness, it's a barricade. Why do they do this? Why would someone voluntarily blindfold themselves in a world that demands we keep our eyes wide open? Is it simple anxiety? Is it a lack of empathy? Or is it actually a sign of a highly distinct type of intelligence, a recognition that the human brain was never designed to process the suffering of millions of people in real time? Tonight, we aren't looking at the headlines. We are looking at the people who refuse to read them. We are going to break down the three distinct psychological profiles of the news avoider. We're going to look at the science of catastrophizing, the hidden strategy of defensive pessimism, and the trauma responses that make silence a necessity, not a luxury. Stick with me until the end, because if you have ever felt the urge to throw your phone in a river and never look back, the answer might explain your entire personality. Let's start with the first group. We can call them the high empathy absorbers. For most people, watching the news is an intellectual exercise. They see a story about a flood in a distant country, a political scandal, or a crime wave. They process the facts. They might feel a moment of sadness or anger. Then the commercial break starts, and they go back to thinking about what to make for dinner. Their brain creates a healthy boundary between the world and my life. But for the high empathy absorber, that boundary simply does not exist. Psychologically, these individuals often possess hyperactive mirror neurons. These are the parts of the brain that allow us to empathize, to feel what another person is feeling. When they see pain on a screen, their body simulates that pain as if it were happening to them, right here, right now. They don't just watch the news, they metabolize it. If they see a mother crying on television, they carry that grief for 3 days. If they read about a recession, they feel the physical weight of poverty before their bank account even changes. Their nervous system cannot distinguish between a threat on the other side of the globe and a threat in their living room. For this group, avoiding the news is not an act of ignorance. It is a trauma response. Many of these people have a history of what psychologists call hypervigilance. Maybe they grew up in a chaotic household where they had to constantly scan the room for danger. Maybe they've experienced a period of life where the rug was pulled out from under them unexpectedly. Their brain has learned that the world is an inherently unsafe place. Because of this, their baseline stress level is already resting near the red zone. They are walking around with a cup that is filled to the brim with water. The news is not just information, it is the drop that causes the cup to overflow. So they construct a protective mechanism. They curate a bubble. They realize that they cannot fix the world's problems if they are paralyzed by them. They understand that empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. If you ask them why they don't know about the latest crisis, they might shrug and say, "I just don't follow politics." But deep down, the truth is much heavier. They are protecting their ability to function. They are choosing to be present for the people they can actually touch, rather than drowning in the sorrow of the millions they cannot help. Then, we have the second group. This group is different. They aren't necessarily overwhelmed by empathy. They are overwhelmed by the unknown. We call them the control seekers. For this group, the decision to turn off the news is rooted in a fascinating psychological paradox involving anxiety and catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is a cognitive distortion. It's when the brain instantly jumps to the worst possible outcome. It's that person we talked about earlier, the one who hears a phone ring and thinks of a funeral. Now, you might think an anxious person would want to watch the news. You might think they would be the ones doom-scrolling at 3 a.m., trying to get all the information so they can prepare. And for many anxious people, that is true. But the control seeker has realized something profound. The news destroys their agency. Psychologically, humans need what we call an internal locus of control. We need to feel that our actions matter, that if we work hard, drive carefully, or eat right, we can influence our future. Modern news creates an external locus of control. It bombards the brain with massive, complex, systemic threats that the individual cannot solve: climate change, global economic collapse, geopolitical war. When a control seeker watches this, their brain enters a loop of catastrophic helplessness. They see a threat, their brain demands a solution, but there is no solution they can enact from their couch. This creates a friction, a cognitive dissonance, that manifests as pure panic. So they unplug, but here is the nuance. They aren't unplugging to be lazy, they are unplugging to regain their agency. By ignoring the macro problems of the world, they are able to hyper-focus on the micro problems they can actually solve. They focus on their health, their finances, their local community, their family. They are trading global awareness for local control. It's a defensive strategy against their own mind. They know that if they let the chaos of the world in, their brain will take those inputs and build a nightmare they can't wake up from. So they keep the door locked. They focus on the variables they can manipulate. They aren't hiding. They are building a fortress where the rules of cause and effect still apply. And finally, we find the third group. This is the most surprising one. These people aren't acting out of trauma, and they aren't acting out of panic. They are acting out of strategy. We call them the defensive pessimists. In psychology, defensive pessimism is a strategy used by anxious but high-performing people to manage their expectations. They lower their expectations to prepare for the worst, which actually motivates them to work harder. But how does this relate to not watching the news? For this group, the news is a distraction from their preparation. They operate on a philosophy of strategic ignorance. They believe that most news is noise, not signal. They understand a concept known as Dunbar's number or cognitive load theory. The human brain has a finite amount of processing power. Every tragedy you process, every outraged opinion piece you read, burns glucose. It takes energy away from your ability to create, to work, to build. The defensive pessimist assumes the world is chaotic. They don't need the news to tell them that things are bad. They have already factored that into their baseline worldview. They know that politicians lie. They know that economies crash. They know that disaster strikes. They don't need a daily reminder. Instead of consuming the fear, they use their energy to build insulation against it. While the rest of the world is glued to the screen watching a report about a potential food shortage, the defensive pessimist is in the garden planting vegetables. While others are debating the economy on Twitter, this person is quietly diversifying their income streams. They treat their attention like a limited currency. They refuse to spend it on things they cannot change. To the outsider, they look aloof. They look like they are burying their head in the sand. But psychologically, they are the most focused people in the room. They are visualizing failure constantly, not to worry about it, but to prevent it in their own lives. They don't watch the news because they are too busy preparing for the reality the news is describing. Now, we have to be honest. There is a cost to this. We cannot romanticize disconnection entirely. There are consequences to living in a silo. When you disconnect from the collective narrative, you can feel a profound sense of isolation. You walk into a break room, and everyone is talking about the scandal of the day, and you have nothing to say. You feel othered. You feel like a ghost in your own society. There is also the guilt, the privilege guilt, the nagging voice in the back of your head that says, "Must be nice to just ignore the suffering of others." You are selfish. Psychologically, this disconnect can lead to a feeling of estrangement. If you don't share the same fears as your tribe, are you still part of the tribe? But let's look at the other side of the coin. This mindset, while exhausting to maintain, often produces the most reliable people in a crisis. Think about it. When a real emergency happens, not a headline, but a real emergency in your immediate life, who do you want next to you? Do you want the person whose nervous system is already fried from worrying about events 3,000 miles away? The person who has compassion fatigue? the person who is already at their breaking point? Or do you want the person who has protected their peace, the person who has reserves of energy, the person who is calm, grounded, and present? The people who don't watch the news are often the ones who have the emotional bandwidth to actually help when help is needed. They haven't spent their empathy on the abstract, they have saved it for the concrete. They are the ones who bring the casserole when you're sick. They are the ones who stay calm when the tire blows out. They are the ones who can listen to your problems without making it about the state of the world. Silence is not always an absence of care. Sometimes, silence is a reservoir. So the question returns quietly. Which one are you? Are you the protective mechanism, the one who feels too much, whose heart breaks too easily, who has to build a wall just to keep their spirit intact? You aren't weak. You are preserving a very fragile, very beautiful capacity for feeling. Are you the control seeker, the one who realizes that the news triggers a spiral of helplessness? You aren't burying your head. You are focusing your eyes on the things your hands can actually touch. Or are you the defensive pessimist, the strategist who knows the world is volatile and chooses to spend their energy building a boat rather than watching the storm on a screen? Maybe you are a mix of all three, or maybe you are just tired, and that is valid too. In a world that monetizes your attention, in a world that profits from your outrage and feeds on your fear, reclaiming your attention is a radical act. It is okay to not know everything. It is okay to not have an opinion on everything. It is okay to shrink your world down to a size that you can actually hold in your hands. This doesn't make you a bad citizen. It makes you a human being, acknowledging your biological limits. The phone rings at midnight. The person who watches the news thinks it's the end of the world. The person who doesn't watch the news thinks it's just a phone call. And somewhere in between those two reactions lies the truth. But only one of those people is going to go back to sleep and wake up rested enough to face whatever tomorrow actually brings. So I have a question for you, and I want you to be honest in the comments. When you step away from the noise, when you stop doom scrolling for a week, do you feel guilty? Or do you feel free? Tell me below. Because understanding your own limits isn't weakness, it's the beginning of wisdom. If this video helped you understand your own mind a little better, hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into the psychology that explains you, not the world around you. Don't forget to like the video. It helps other people find this quiet corner of the internet. I'll see you there.